Today, guys, we're going to be talking about a film that is exceedingly strange and is known by many names.
Reptilian.
I like to call it Yonggary. However, the film is properly pronounced Yonggary, I think. And on top of that, it's called Reptilian 2001, Reptile, something like that. There's a lot of names for this film, and it is a South Korean film that is in the vein of like a kaiju film. So it's similar to, say, Godzilla.
Godzilla. Godzilla.
However, the film is so fucking weird from front to back, and that it's just pretty much a jumbled mess in my head. So I figured I'd kind of talk about it here with you guys and try to lay out what I think was going on in this film. I might be wrong, I might be right, I have no idea. But first, let's start with a little bit of backstory. This film has pretty much an all-American cast, while also having a South Korean director. It was shot, I believe, or it's supposed to be based in South Korea, but also has certain parts that are completely based in the US. Particularly, you'll see the Pentagon a few times in this film, and they are, of course, in the US. And the monster gets transported to Los Angeles at one point. So there are definitely a lot of the aspects that are very Americanized, and particularly, of course, when you have an American cast, and the film is naturally in English, it really doesn't feel like a Korean film. Now, I bring this all up because essentially the way we came across this was my co-host and brother Jason Nova. He mentioned that all of the Korean films he's seen have been bangers, and I said, well, that's just because we've sought out good Korean cinema. However, if we seek out bad Korean cinema, I'm sure that we will go ahead and find some pretty terrible shit. And this was one of the first things that came up. However, the fact that it again is quite Americanized does not really help my point in any way, shape, or form, I will admit. So generally, we went into this kind of expecting something entirely different than what we got. And on top of that, there's just everything from terrible effects to horrible dialogue.
Well, I must admit that it's the largest unearthing of its kind. Ever.
To a completely incoherent storyline that makes this film actually kind of funny in a lot of ways, even though it's definitely an unintentional funny.
Give me my camera back.
Bad press isn't going to do either of us any good. And from now on, you only photograph what I tell you to photograph. Holly, how did you let this happen?
On top of that, a little more background is that this film was apparently one of the most expensive Korean films made at the time of its release, and still is quite big on the budget. Let me go ahead and actually just double check what the budget was for this film. So in US, it was $13.5 million in 1999, and on top of that, they got backing from like Hyundai Corp, Financial Corp, you know, the people that back Hyundai cars. On top of that, they got a bunch of backing from the Korean government, which allowed them to use military bases and a bunch of other stuff in order to easily get sets done for certain scenes in the film. And so there was a lot that went behind this and seemingly a lot of interest in it. On top of that, there was a like short trailer shown at like the Cannes Film Festival, or Cannes, I don't know how you say it. And essentially there was interest sparked by international distributors, and they immediately went to sell the film's distribution rights for like $2.82 million off top to various different countries internationally. So like this was seemingly supposed to be a pretty decent film by all accounts. And the last piece that I'll say is the reason this is known by so many different names is there was apparently a 1999 version that plays out somewhat differently than the 2001 version that we have nowadays. However, the 1999 version has never been released on home media, and so therefore we're going to be talking, of course, about the 2001 version of this movie, which had certain reshoots and various other aspects redone for its international movie release. So generally speaking, what is this film about? Well, as I mentioned, it's kind of like if you were to mix Godzilla with the Independence Day film. Now, at first, I didn't really feel this was a fair comparison, as my brother is the one that made it. However, as the film went on, it became a little bit more and more clear that there were certain aspects that were somewhat similar, although I would say that it's not like a direct rip. It just has a lot of things that feel very, very much like the Independence Day film. So basically, what we get when this starts is we have a scientist who turns out to be a kind of crazy asshole, and he has a team of people around him as well as a journalist come in, and they are excavating an old dinosaur. It's one of the biggest fossils that I think probably would have ever existed if it was real, and the journalist is kind of being kept on a leash and only shown so much. We can feel that there's a level of sinisterness underneath this entire thing for some reason. However, there's no real reason that we can tell off rip. However, as things progress on this excavation site, what we find is that various strange things happen, such as random deaths occur, as well as the bones of the fossil occasionally seem to grow back. Beyond that, the multiple deaths were caused by certain phenomena which are very strange and really can't be explained by any normal laws of physics. However, instead of going and opening an investigation like the people around this scientist tell him to do, the scientist hides the bodies as well as just pushes everything under the rug and tells the journalist that he needs to play by his rules or else he's not going to get this big story of a lifetime.
Like I said before, if you want this story, you better play by my rules.
As things continue to go on, however, the crew find more bodies once again. There's like probably 4 or 5 deaths on this fucking excavation site before the crew finally says, hey, we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay then, whoever wants to leave can leave. But don't forget that you're all illegals, and I'll report every damn last one of you!
And there's also this really weird moment where, like, the fucking scientist basically admits to having hid bodies that died the night before inadvertently for some reason.
It's growing fangs. And on top of that, we found another body.
That's impossible. We disposed... Never mind.
Anyway, very weird moment. But so basically we then realize that there are aliens overwatching this entire thing. Now you may be asking, why aliens? God only knows. Okay, they were like, we need to make it somewhat unique comparatively to the Godzilla film. So instead of just doing some, monster rises out of the sea shit, we're going to have aliens come down and they're going to reanimate Yonggary. Now, Yonggary is the dinosaur thing that they found the fossils of, and essentially it is these fucking aliens that are able to make the bones of Yonggary grow as well as the rest of his meat and skin grows back, and so Yonggary is able to come to life, and he starts smashing shit to bits. As this all goes on, there is people that are studying the aliens and they find certain hieroglyphs and shit and they intercept stuff from the aliens and they try to kind of decipher what the aliens are saying. While this is all happening, Yonggary wreaks havoc on the excavation site as well as he kind of just wreaks havoc in various different locations, although the aliens are the ones that kind of teleport Yonggary around as well as they can kind of just make him invisible throughout the film. However, they kind of figure out ways to work around this. For example, later on in the film, they realize they can track Yonggary with like infrared and shit like that, which they should have probably thought of much earlier in the film. Anyway, back to the main point, there's this constant argument back and forth between various parties as to whether Yonggary should be killed or whether the aliens should be killed or whether they should be brought back to be studied. There's one guy who seemingly has the opinion that the aliens should be brought back to be studied because he's kind of like the head of this space agency that studies aliens.
We're being stabbed. Their primitive technology has detected our craft. We must commence the invasion now.
No! They are powerless to stop us. Resume reanimation.
And so that guy kind of reminds me of the weird scientist from Independence Day. That can be another drawback to that.
Well, Guess you'd like to see the big tamale, huh?
And so, generally speaking, he has this opinion throughout the entire film until the end, where he suddenly makes a random change. And rather than now wanting to have the aliens be brought in for investigation and shit, he just wants the young Gary to be killed, and that's it.
General, you've got to destroy it. It's a killer, plain and simple.
Why are you so interested all of a sudden? What's in it for you?
I know I've made some mistakes. I'm just trying to make amends.
So much so that he holds up everybody in the room and says, hey, I know you guys don't want to kill young Gary because you think he's helping us. However, we need to fucking murder this thing. And he like jams the radars and the like radio stations or whatever the fuck in the Pentagon until they agree to do so, or to let him leave, which I don't understand why he doesn't know that they'll just go arrest him later. It's not like he can use the passport. He just tried to fuck over the Pentagon.
Smitty, what the hell's going on?
I don't know, we're being jammed.
Well, get us back up!
All systems are down.
It's coming from...
There.
So that's like one of the main aspects I would say that's really weird is there's that character that really has no idea what he's doing. On top of that, we still have the Dr. Hughes character, which is the weird scientist guy who tries to kind of help figure out young Gary throughout this entire thing, as well as like he and the other like side scientists that he had kind of decipher these hieroglyphs in order to figure out what it is that they can do to defeat young Gary. As the movie goes on, they do decipher some of the hieroglyphs, which I have no idea how they would even begin to do so because they're not related to our alphabet. However, generally speaking, they managed to do it somehow, and they find out young Gary has like a crystal in his head.
I drew it at the dig site, young Gary's forehead. The shape?
You're right. That's it.
So this entire time while this is all happening, like young Gary is fucking crushing cities. There are random SWAT teams thrown at him. They're trying to gun him down. Nothing's happening. You can't hurt him. There's dudes in jetpacks fucking flying around and shit.
Move out!
And basically these aliens are just, again, teleporting young Gary around to various different locations, including LA, so that way he can smash up the city. On top of that, young Gary, as well as a bunch of the other effects that happen here, are just some of the worst early CGI that I have ever seen. It looks absolutely disgusting, like way, way worse than I would have even expected for like 1999 for some reason. It was just so fucking bad.
Compared to this guy, Godzilla is a pussy. Arnold Wilson, take the left flank.
And on top of that, like a lot of the special effects, as I mentioned, were like this. It's not just young Gary all the way throughout. So again, they decipher these hieroglyphs, and they find out that there's like a crystal in young Gary's forehead, and that they can use that crystal to kill him if they shoot into the crystal sufficiently enough.
The diamond! Shoot for the diamond!
On top of that, they decipher that there's going to be another being of light that is sent down to join the battle. So then the aliens send down a beam of light to introduce this other monster called Psychros. And young Gary and Psychros battle it out like the giant fucking mantis thing. I don't know what it was. I know it's not a mantis, but like you know, versus Godzilla. It's that type of thing. The monsters versus monsters thing. Except it's two terrible, worst CGI monsters I've seen the entire time. And also it's very funny, right? Because before this other monster comes in, they have like various fighter jets that are coming in to just like shoot missiles and shit. And they'll, like, young Gary just ducks. It's so funny. He ducks each time. but they keep fucking shooting him with these rockets, and the rockets go and hit random buildings in the cities, meaning that unless these are empty office buildings because it's later at night, they're just killing random civilians in apartment buildings.
What the hell is the matter with you people? You've caused more damage than that goddamn thing did!
Which is really fucked up.
Here, calm down. Have some candy.
No, I don't want any candy. Leave me alone.
Anyway, back to the weird CGI battle. So there's a weird CGI battle between Yonggary and this thing. While that's happening, the Pentagon is like, fuck it, we're gonna nuke Yonggary. We're gonna nuke Yonggary. However, Yonggary seems to now be have broken the spell of the aliens and is now acting on his own free will. And he also is fighting back against Psychros. So he seems to be on the people's side. He's the people's champ. Okay? And therefore, they're like, yo, why are we going to nuke Yonggary? He's based, right? And that's fair. You don't want to nuke somebody who's based. And so they're like, hey, fighter jet with the nukes. Don't drop those nukes. And for some reason, they act like it takes forever to get patched into these guys. Usually people are in the Pentagon or you know, when they do these types of missions are just constantly in contact with these like pilots and shit.
Beta 1, this is command base. Transmitting abort code.
And it's been that way for a long time. So I don't understand how that worked. And they try to add suspense that way by making this like weird thing where it's like, fighter jet, can you hear me? Can you hear me? It was so stupid. And then finally, of course, they do get a hold of him. He calls off the nuke and they don't nuke the city, which is funny because they were just going to nuke all of Los Angeles because they're like, fuck it, we don't like this big monster. So rather than just like, you know, letting the couple buildings fall, we're gonna just fucking level the whole city. That's intelligent. So you may be asking, hey, how does any of this make sense? And my answer to you is that it doesn't. I have no idea what the point of this film was. The aliens, I believe, just like whip off at the end. They're just like, yo, guys, we're going to take off in our spaceship. It was a very pointless and weird film. And the only decent aspects of it were the fact that some of it was so bad that it was comical, particularly the crazy scientist at the beginning the most. It was quite funny.
You got my word on it. I'm out of here, and we all take our chances.
As it goes on, though, we get less of him being insane, so it's not as funny as it could be. But yeah, it's just a fucking weird and terrible film, and I absolutely despise it.
This is too weird. I got this crazy-ass control freak professor, a fanatic old man that should be doing tours in a museum somewhere, a cute, bitchy chick.
What do you guys think? Have you seen this film? Do you think it's good or bad? Let me know in the comments down below. Besides that, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That'll pop up during the outro, and the rest of our links are down in the description too. We have gaming sessions for gaming content, smoking sessions and movie sessions for movie content, CrazyRocky here for variety content, and fucking the Try Podcast for our podcast channel. All right, guys. I'll see you all in the next CrazyRocky video.
Spaced out of my head to the depths of the universe. It's a spell or a trance just to open up.